Jesse and Emily here again.
This week we're back to share more clips from our trips to some of our local Parks Canada sites. So if you missed our video last week about Laurier House and the Rideau Canal, you can find that in the My Parks Pass blog. Look for episode 3 of the Capture Your Heritage series.
For this week's video, we're going to head a little further away from home and visit the St. Lawrence Islands National Park and Fort Wellington National Historic Site. At each of these places, we were joined by some amazing Parks Canada staff who were able to talk to us a little bit about the importance of each of these sites.
So St. Lawrence Islands National Park is especially unique because it's actually a series of isolated pieces of land that have been donated to Parks Canada over the years. A lot of these pieces of land are actually entire islands, hence the name of the park.
Fort Wellington, on the other hand, is really cool in a very different way. It was built right after the War of 1812 and played a very significant role in the Upper Canadian Rebellions of 1837 and 1838. So without further ado, here are the highlights from these visits.
107 years ago in 1904, that's when a group of locals from around here decided to group together and petition the government to protect this space because it's really special and beautiful. So St. Lawrence Islands National Park is in the Greater Lakes St. Lawrence lowlands, but it's anomalous because it's this strip of granite. The granite that makes up the islands also impacts the trees and life that you find here because it's a northern type of rock. So this is where we see northern and southern species mixing and mingling. A common loon, which is normally found in the north, cottage country, flies in the same sky as the turkey vulture, which is traditionally a southern species down in the States. Believe it or not, this landscape didn't used to be a beautifully green and blue river full of islands. It used to be a mountain range. And over thousands of years, the glaciers ground down the mountains, and then as they receded, the fresh water melting from the glaciers made the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River, flooding the ground down mountaintops. And what used to be 1,000 mountaintops became 1,000 islands. 90% of all aquatic life is born and raised along shorelines and wetlands. And there's so many species that rely on these wetlands. They're very sensitive and important that we protect them here in the park. We use fire, prescribed fire, which is fire that we set on purpose and monitor very closely to be safe, to help certain species that are dependent on fire survive, like pitchpine and deerberry. This is the Thanksgiving address that the Mohawks of Akwesasne give before and after each meeting or gathering that they have, and they thank all of these elements of nature like the stars and Elder Brother Sun. And the cool thing, if you ever get down to Mallorytown Landing, is that each one of these symbols is carved on an accent rock and distributed all around Mallorytown Landing. And a challenge is put to all visitors of the park to find each one of these rocks and identify all of the symbols to sort of complete your experience and recognize all these elements.
During the War of 1812, the British were at war with the United States. This was a British colony, and so you had to build something to protect this major highway, which was the river. But we're in the 1840s period when a regiment called the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment were stationed here, and these guys, they aren't represented at any sites anywhere else in Canada. They would have had to serve 10 to 15 good years with the British Army before coming here, and they were here just to maintain peace along the borders, and they were here, they were at Fort Henry, they were at Fort George, they were all along the border system. They could have families living on site with them. So rather than having a fort filled with soldiers and a few women and children wandering around, this one had half of its population as women and children in the 1840s.
You were no longer able to live here at Fort Wellington past the age of 14. You were considered an adult. So you had to go and find yourself employment. You could perhaps be an apprentice, apprentice to learn to make shoes, to a blacksmith. You could be a washerwoman. You could perhaps be sort of a nanny or something. But most likely young women were getting married at this age, and young men would also be able to join the army if they wanted to do that.
Well, Lieutenant Sharp was the officer here. There were two officers originally. Captain Black, the higher ranking officer, chose to live in the town of Prescott, and this became almost like a 9-to-5 job for him, whereas Lieutenant Sharp got this whole building to himself, and he was managing on site 24 hours a day. The guardroom was used to store men. So in between sentry duty, which meant you'd be outside watching for any imminent attack, you would come in here to warm your feet, rest a little bit, maybe play some cards. So there's a bed here. If you were to lay down for a quick wink, you'd have to keep all of your implements on, all of your pouches and cartouche and all that. This is the powder magazine, and if a single spark was introduced into this powder magazine, the entire fort would be history. Eh?
Well, spark or no spark, Fort Wellington certainly did go down in history.
If you visit the fort during the summer, you'll get to see them do rifle demonstrations, and you can even see the cannon being fired, as it would have when the fort was operational. And as an added bonus, you can even dress up as a 19th century soldier and wage war against enemy troops. But don't worry, I know what you're thinking. There's no age limit on this activity. Trust me, I asked.
It's true. So now that we've visited all these Parks Canada sites, it's time for us to pick our own topic. So tune in 2 weeks when we get into the really fun stuff in our video series, making our own videos.
If you're absolutely dying to know what we choose to make our video about, you're going to have to wait until the next episode. In the meantime, you can check out the My Parks Pass site and read about the featured site of the week, in which we profile a different national park, national historic site, and national marine conservation area, and provide a list of topics for your video.